In a quiet town nestled between rolling hills and golden meadows, an old man lay in a modest home that was filled more with memories than visitors. Time had not been kind to him, his bones ached, his vision had faded, and his hearing had dulled, but what hurt him most was the silence. Not the kind that comes from age, but the kind that comes from loneliness. Once a respected businessman and a loving father, he now lived alone, his son far away, consumed by his fast-paced life in the city. The old man's days blurred into one another, punctuated only by the ticking clock and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. That all began to change the day she arrived. She was just a caregiver, hired by a local agency. Her name was Maria, a woman of simple means but boundless compassion. Young and soft-spoken, she entered the house with an air of humility, carrying nothing but a small bag and a smile that seemed to light up even the most shadowed corners of the home. At first, the old man resisted her presence. He didn't want help, he didn't want pity, and most of all, he didn't want reminders of how much he could no longer do for himself. But Maria wasn't deterred. She moved gently through his routines, never pushing too hard. She helped him bathe without making him feel helpless. She tidied the house while humming softly. And in the quiet evenings, when his eyes would cloud with tears from memories too heavy to speak of, she would sit beside him and simply be there. She never asked about his past, never forced him to talk. She just offered her presence like a silent promise, "You're not alone." One night, as a storm raged outside, Maria noticed the old man shivering under his blanket. The power had gone out, and the heat had faded with it. She wrapped him in an extra quilt, then pulled a chair close to the bed. She took his hand, fragile and cold in her own, and began to sing. Her voice was low and gentle, barely louder than the wind outside. She sang a lullaby her mother used to sing when she was small, a tune filled with warmth and comfort. The old man's eyes slowly closed, his breathing steadied, and for the first time in many weeks, he slept peacefully. What Maria didn't know was that someone was watching. Earlier that day, the old man's estranged son, Daniel, had flown in unexpectedly. A wealthy tech executive from the city, Daniel rarely visited. Guilt weighed on him, but life had always seemed too busy: meetings, deadlines, investors. He'd come home this time unannounced, hoping to surprise his father, but when he arrived and heard singing through the cracked door, he didn't enter. He stood quietly in the hallway, listening. What he saw wasn't just a caregiver doing her job, it was a young woman pouring her soul into comforting a man she didn't owe anything to. Daniel stayed in the shadows as Maria sang. He watched the way she stroked his father's hand, how she adjusted the blanket so gently, and how she leaned in closer as the wind howled outside. In that moment, Daniel felt something break inside him, not just guilt for having stayed away, but shame for having forgotten what love looked like. He had assumed his father's world had shrunk to medications and silence, but Maria had shown him that even in frailty, there was still room for dignity and connection. The next morning, Maria awoke early as always. She made tea, prepared breakfast, and began her usual routine. She didn't see Daniel until she turned the corner and found him sitting quietly in the living room, staring at a photo of himself and his father from years ago. Startled, she apologized, not knowing who he was. Daniel stood up, introduced himself, and then something surprising happened. He bowed his head and thanked her. "Thank you for loving my father," he said. "Even when I couldn't." Maria was speechless. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She tried to brush it off, saying it was her job, but Daniel wouldn't accept that. "No," he said, "this goes far beyond a job." Over the next few days, Daniel stayed at the house. He watched Maria closely, not out of suspicion but admiration. He saw how she knew exactly how to lift his father without causing pain, how she prepared food that he would actually eat, and how she never lost her patience, even when the old man became stubborn or confused. Daniel began to see things through her eyes, the value of time, the beauty of presence, and the sacredness of care. One evening, he asked Maria to sit down with him. "You've done more for my father than I have in the last 10 years, he admitted. "And it's not just your care. It's your heart. You've reminded me who he is, and who I used to be." Maria smiled softly. "We all lose our way sometimes," she said. "But love has a way of bringing us back." Inspired by her words, Daniel made a decision. He arranged for his father to receive the best possible care going forward, but not in a sterile facility or faraway hospice. He hired a medical team to come to the home, improved the living space, and ensured Maria had everything she needed to continue providing care. But more than that, he decided to stay. He converted the study into a guest room and made the quiet promise that he would never again let distance or duty come before love. Maria, for her part, continued her work with grace and warmth. But something had changed. She was no longer just a caregiver, she had become part of the family. Daniel respected her deeply, not just for what she had done for his father, but for how she had changed him as well. Over time, their bond deepened. Conversations turned into shared laughter. Simple dinners became cherished rituals. And one spring morning, as the old man sat on the porch with a blanket over his knees, he watched the two of them in the garden, Maria showing Daniel how to plant tulips, and smiled. "You gave me my son back," he whispered. Maria looked up, her eyes soft. He was never gone, just waiting to remember. Months later, when the old man passed peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by those he loved, Maria and Daniel stood together by his side. He held her hand the way his father once held hers, and they both knew that this story wasn't ending, it was beginning anew. Daniel didn't return to the city. He started a foundation in his father's name, focused on home care for the elderly, especially those who couldn't afford it. He made Maria the director, trusting her heart more than any resume. Together, they changed the lives of countless families, offering dignity and compassion where it was most needed. This story isn't just about an old man, or a caregiver, or a son rediscovering his heart. It's about the quiet power of kindness, the way one gentle voice can calm a storm, and how love, real, selfless love, can change lives in ways no one expects. To those who care for others, who sing softly in the silence, who offer their hearts without expecting anything in return, you are the unsung heroes of the world. You remind us all that in the smallest acts of love, we find the greatest hope. And sometimes, when you think no one is watching, someone is. And that moment might just change everything.